Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Ontario College of Teachers 2018 Annual Meeting of Members. My name is Lori Luckenuk. I'm one of the speakers for the College of Teachers, and I'm going to be emceeing a little bit this morning, and then we're going to go into a panel discussion and some questions and answers. So welcome, and thank you for being here this evening. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Wendat, Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, Métis, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nations. Today's theme for our meeting is about the evolving nature of public interest. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone about our question and answer session that will be following the presentations by the Council Chair, Registrar, and selection of committees. If you have a question, please write it down and place it in one of the many drop boxes around the room, so you'll see them around the room. We'll be collecting these questions throughout today's meeting. Today's meeting is being live streamed, for your information, over the internet. For those at home, you can submit questions by visiting pollev.com, that's P-O-L-L, capital E-V.com, /OCTOEEO. So let me ask you this. What does the public expect of regulatories like the College or the College of Veterinarians or the College of Nurses? You often hear that regulators exist to protect the public interest. But what does it mean? Why should the public care? And why should regulators matter? For the next 40 minutes, we will answer some of these questions. But first, I would like to introduce to you your College Council. It is made up of 23 members of the college elected by their peers and 14 members of the public appointed by the government. Together, they develop and approve policies that regulate the teaching profession in Ontario. So I'd just like to name them. If you could just raise your hand if you're in attendance when I call your name, that would be great. Angela De Palma. Pierre-Olivier Arsenault. Brian Beal. Jean-Luc Bernard, Brigitte Bedell-Paquette, Anne Cioschini, Elizabeth Edgar Webkamagad, Susan Elliott Johns, Tim Gernstein, Marie-Therese Hokeam, Godwin Ifede, Jane Ishibashi, Jacqueline Karsmeyer, Matthew Kavanaugh, James Knopp, Colleen Landers, Shanley Linton, Mireille Loubert, Shannon Marcus, Marlène Marois, Richard Michaud, Michelle Miner-Seal, Sarah Nguyen, Claudia Patnaud-Daniels, Bill Petrie, Tom Potter, Jonathan Rose, Rob Ryan, Anthony Samchuk, Vicky Shannon, Stéphane Vallée, Ravi Wethamani, flip side, Rana Warsh, Nicole Van Woudenberg, and that is your council members. I would like to introduce you to your CEO and Registrar, Michael Salvatore, and the Chair of Council, Angela De Palma. They will lead the discussion. Please give them a warm welcome.
Thank you, Lori. Good evening. Bonjour, bonsoir. Welcome, everyone. We're beginning with our esteemed panel and just a couple of introductions to let you know who they are. We're looking at the public interest, as Lori has suggested, what's meant by the public interest, why the public should care about self-regulatory organizations that are funded by members, and we're going to look at why self-regulatory bodies matter. Joining us today to discuss the evolving nature of the public interest and what the public expects from organizations that regulate Ontario's professions are Kathy English, Public Editor of the Toronto Star, Jan Robinson, CEO and Registrar of the College of Veterinarians of Ontario, and Richard Steinicke, a senior partner with Steinicke Mercure Leblanc. Begin with Kathy on the end. Since 2007, Kathy English has been the public editor of the Toronto Star. The public editor's office handles readers' queries about accuracy and the Star's journalistic standards in line with the Star's commitment to accountability and transparency. She has served on the faculty of the Ryerson School of Journalism, launched websites for 2 Canadian media companies, Sun Media and Transcontinental Media, and directed the launch of San Francisco-based parenting website Baby Center Canada. She's an executive board member of the Canadian Journalism Foundation, a member of the professional advisory boards of Ryerson School of Journalism and the Sheridan College Journalism Program. She serves on the board of the Gordon Sinclair Foundation and on the advisory board of Informed Opinions. In the past, she's also served on the boards of the National Newspaper Awards and the Association of News Ombudsmen. Kathy holds a Master's of History degree from the University of Western Ontario. She was the recipient of Western Ontario's Faculty of Information and Media Studies Asper Teaching Fellowship in the winter of 2018. Welcome, Kathy. Jan Robinson, on the opposite side at the end of the table, is the Registrar and Chief Executive Officer of the College of Veterinarians of Ontario, a position she has held since 2012. A leader in profession-based regulation, Jan has over 25 years of experience providing vision and direction to regulatory and public policy organizations. She's a keen strategist with an ability to build partnerships and engagement at the provincial, national, and international levels. Jan's position enables her to bring innovative approaches to the delivery of regulatory programs. Key contributions include the development of a framework to establish governance excellence, implementing an accountability, risk, and evidence-based approach to regulation at all levels of the organization, and leading legislative change that promotes public access and safety. She has enjoyed opportunities to speak and to provide advice on regulatory systems and issues across professions and around the world. Her greatest interest is in influencing decision-making that impacts the public good. Welcome to you, Jan. And Richard Steinicke, in the middle, practices law exclusively in the area of professional regulation. He's the editor of the widely read Gray Areas newsletter, commenting on recent developments in professional regulation. Because of its comprehensive nature, courts and tribunals have cited his book, A Complete Guide to the Regulated Health Professions Act, well over a dozen times, even in cases dealing with non-health professions. Richard spends most of his professional life teaching, writing, speaking, training, and consulting on professional regulation issues. He reads every Canadian common law court decision on professional regulation that he can find, and has a certificate in risk management from the University of Toronto. In 2015, he received the Regulatory Excellence Award from the Council on Licensure Enforcement and Regulation, CLEAR, and Richard is counsel to Steinicke Mercure Leblanc. Welcome, Richard. And Angela and I are going to begin with some questions for you. Still me. We'll begin with you, Richard, if we could. As I've just suggested, you're very well versed in the regulatory world, and you've provided and continue to provide counsel to several regulators. Do you think that the business of self-regulation is too complicated or too far removed from the public for them to really care about it or even to understand it?
Well, I think the public definitely cares about the regulation of professionals. When bad things happen, abuse, dishonesty, they want to know that it's being taken care of. We just need to look at the media coverage the last day or two with the Nurse Wetlaufer inquiry. People want to know how this could have happened and who's responsible. And I think the public even wants reassurance that high-quality services are being provided. I think parents sense when their teacher is inspiring their children, and they might also sense when a teacher might be coasting through the course. Whether the public understands self-regulation is a little bit more difficult to answer. There definitely is some confusion. You just take the name Ontario College of Teachers and what does that signify to many members of the public, and its structure and how its role in relation to school boards and the Federation and the government ministries. There might be confusion in the minds of many people. But in my experience, the public has a general sense that there is a regulator somewhere in the mix, and they are concerned as to whether the regulatory body is focused on the public interest or perhaps professional self-preservation.
Thank you, Richard.
Jan, within professional regulation, generally we hear a lot about risk, risk management, identification, or mitigation. Could you speak about the place of risk in the work of a regulator operating in the public interest?
In thinking about this, actually, I'd like to really take us to 30,000 feet, because I think it's easier to be at a different level than that as we do our work. We tend to get a little narrower in our thinking, because the purpose of regulation more generally is to manage risk. Whether it's real or whether there's potential there. And it was interesting because I was just reading out of Australia something related to administering regulation. And they were speaking to regulators across the board and talking about their purpose, whether it's economic, social, or environmental. And regardless of the objectives, what they were talking about was our opportunity and our obligation to look at decreasing burden, to focus on risk and compliance, to be accountable and transparent in our decision-making, and monitoring our performance in terms of achieving our outcomes. So it doesn't really matter whether we're talking about aviation, whether we're talking about insurance, finance, engineers, energy. You know, we happen to be in the business of occupation or profession-based regulation. But when we really think about it, our business is risk. And if we really go back to our early days, Angela, and we're thinking about this in the regulation of professions in Canada, this really began in the 1850s, started with law. And the concept there really was social and economic. You know, this had nothing to do about status. In the 50s, when there was another boom in relationship to regulation, we were really thinking about employers because we had this great job occurrence happening, and employers were interested about discerning competency and where was the risk related to that. And in the 90s, of course, not that consumers didn't have a voice beforehand, but we've got the internet age and the social media age taking off. And so the expectation or the perceived concepts related to that started to influence. So I would say, you know, our job is really about understanding current and emerging risk within a profession, a deep understanding of the context and the issues occurring there. What's the problem? Who else needs to be involved? And how do we mitigate it? And is it really a regulatory solution? And I would suggest that it needs collaborative relationships and a good tool chest, I guess, to get the job well done.
Thanks, Jen.
Kathy, you might have guessed the next question's for you. We find that the public often expects of us immediate justice when someone has been accused of professional misconduct. How would you suggest we manage public expectations, sometimes channeled through us through the media, while ensuring due process?
Right. Thank you, and thanks for inviting me. First of all, I think we have to acknowledge that we live in a very different era now, that social media has created almost a need for, or a vigilante justice. And I'm amazed by how many times there's an accusation of wrongdoing and the social media mob goes straight to fire them, as if everybody should be fired without any due process. So here is where I believe that having very clearly thought out, transparent policies and procedures that you can say to, whether it's the media, whether it's the people involved who've made the complaint, yes, we are taking this seriously. Yes, we have a process to work through this. Obviously, you can't ignore the complaints, but you can't be intimidated by the mob. And I don't think you can be intimidated by the media either. I think it's important to say, we are working through this. We have a process. We will let you know when we can. We will let you know what we can. And there may be some things we can't tell you because they are personnel issues. And I think as long as you know, you're sort of not making it up on the fly, that this is all well thought out, then you can go through those steps, and it's very credible.
Thanks, Kathy.
Jan, back to you. Do you think the public knows enough about regulators to have expectations? And what should they know and why?
So I have had the privilege of leading 3 different professions, which has been fantastic, and it's all related to regulation. And I can say to you that we all equally suffer from misunderstanding. So there's no sort of bias in that regard. It goes across the board. I guess there are a couple of things that I would comment on. We all have the challenge of the continuous return to the concept of the guild. Professions really began, Egypt, Greece, all of those variations of the guild around status, power, money, and being very isolated. And that history, no matter how long ago it is, continues to repeat itself. It's very deep-seated. And when I think about the media doesn't really help us in this regard because we return again and again to professional self-interest, whether it's there or not. So I'd just comment on that. I think there's also a continuum of knowledge. And so if we think about the bell curve, which would very much fall into this particular profession's concepts, I actually, in my heart of hearts, over 25 years, I'd say it'll be forever thus. I think that what we have is we have an informed public that's on this side. We have a sense of public who doesn't care one way or the other. And in the middle, we will always be attempting to push this arrow towards the middle of the bell curve. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's just okay. That's our job, and we need to think about that as creatively and as situational as it is. Because we will all, as each profession, or again, if we go higher, there will be issues that we want to collectively think about. How do we move that together? I think the other component I'd want to speak on a little bit about this is that you use the word public expects, and I would actually like to counter that a little bit with the concept of the public assumes. I think that expects is a logical component and assumes is a more an emotional state. And Stephen Lewis, I know we've got a couple of them in the country, but Stephen Lewis that I'm speaking to specifically is Stephen Lewis, who is a health policy expert out of Saskatchewan. And he has spoken to this very eloquently about the fact that we talk about expectation, but he really thinks it's about public assumption. And when you look at the literature, much of it also points in that direction. So if we go to our job, we would go to, the public assumes that teachers are qualified. The public assumes that they're maintaining competence. They assume that the regulator's giving them good information to make decisions or to understand their processes. They assume that we're helping them to understand what they need to know. And I think the other component, and it was talked about just a little bit, is that we're a need-to-know commodity. And so that's part of the public perspective as well. So I'm not suggesting not to communicate or not to continue to do some of the things that we do in order to increase understanding. But I would suggest that what we need to focus on is how are we communicating our trustworthiness? And again, if you go back to the key points on trustworthiness, that's about how do we demonstrate our competence and what we're mandated to do, how do we demonstrate our honesty, and how do we demonstrate that we're reliable. So this is much more about how we tell our story than it is about do we have a story that we need to get out there. I think those are different things. And so I suggest that why we do what we do, not what we do, how we focus on why we do what we do, and what's important to pay attention to is really what we need to help the public with. And I also think we need to get over the fact that no system's perfect. No teacher's perfect, no veterinarian's perfect. It just is what it is. We're vulnerable, and we need to be courageous enough to share our challenges, because I think sharing our challenges in the work that we do will increase our credibility and therefore our trustworthiness.
Thank you, Jane.
Kathy, in your response to the previous question, you spoke about the importance of regulators having established processes and policies, and that those be well known to the regulator, and perhaps to the media or the public in advance, so that when we're answering a question, we can say, this is the process. I think to a certain extent, the public and the media have to have trust in the regulator in order to accept an answer that may say, this is the process, but I can't give you any more information. And if trust is the basis of public confidence, and we come back to what we're all about, what do you think it takes then? And it might pick up a little bit on some of the notions Jan just introduced about being reliable, honest, and competent, but what do you think it takes to earn and keep the public's confidence?
Well, I think we should address the elephant in the room, first of all, and acknowledge how little trust is in the media right now. That, we're looking at record low numbers of trust in the media. It is higher in Canada than in the States. The recent Edelman Trust Barometer indicated much higher in Canada than the States. But we are living in an era where, we have a U.S. president who seeks to demonize the media, where media mistakes are rampant, where there's more polarization than ever before, again, amplified by social media. So I want to put this on the table that the media is not perfect. We are grappling with these questions of trust every single day. In many ways, my portfolio is now the trust and transparency portfolio across the company. It's my job to come up with the policies and hold journalists to account for the policies and processes that that will contribute to our trust issues. So I guess one of the things, so I talk a lot about this both in-house and to the public, and my thing is that nothing undermines trust more than hypocrisy, that we have to do what we say we're going to do. So again, and that builds on what I just said about, having policies and procedures, but if you have them and then you don't live by them, then you've really undermined trust and given people something to distrust. And I think we started out also saying that, we're here to talk about the public interest, and the public interest is a question that is asked in journalism almost every single day in a newsroom when we're on a, so we had an interesting discussion yesterday about the Elizabeth Wetlauer, about the written confession, which is very, very upsetting to see, certainly upsetting to the families involved. And we had a big ethics discussion about, should we publish this? Here's the reasons why we should, here's the reasons why we might not. So we always come down to, what is the public interest here? And on this one, we made a call, and I don't make the calls, but I do facilitate these ethical discussions. You make a call around the public interest is what serves democracy, what serves citizens. It's bigger than any one of our institutions. It's bigger than any one person who's either accused of wrongdoing or trying to really rehabilitate their reputation. So we're always trying to think in that bigger, what is the public interest? And does the public need this information? And how does that serve democracy? So again, it's walking the talk. If you say you're going to do something, do it. And I think when you don't, that is one of the things that really undermines trust. And then the other thing I found, because I also correct all the mistakes, is that nothing undermines trust also more than not admitting to mistakes. That, as you say, we are all human. Not one of us work in institutions where people are not going to make mistakes, whether that's, rogue professionals or honest mistakes. There's lots of mistakes we made. Owning up to them, saying, we messed up, here's what we're going to do about it, we're sorry. We all know there's a whole series of steps that you go through to do a proper I'm sorry apology. We've learned from this. And what I've found is that people really like it when I write those columns that say, we really messed up badly here.
Thanks, Kathy. And I was glad that when you were starting that sentence saying nothing undermines trust more than, I thought you were going to say making mistakes. And I was going to really feel indicted. But I think
mistakes are
admitting to them, absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Richard, you have the next question. Some regulators suggest there should be more appointed members on their governing councils to enhance public perception, speaking of trust. And some have suggested that regulatory bodies should be governed by councils made up entirely of lay members or experts in the field. What are your thoughts about those differing opinions?
That's a loaded question to ask someone who makes their living working for regulators whose board members are largely elected from their respective professions. For pretty well my entire career, I've been convinced that self-regulation model where the majority of the members of council are elected from the profession is the best model. And it has two enormous advantages, expertise and buy-in. So in terms of expertise, if you have a complaint coming in about how a teacher responded to a young student with cognitive issues who ran out of the schoolyard onto a busy street in heavy traffic, I think I would want to have some teachers on the committees dealing with that issue, because that is really hard to relate to unless you're there, unless you know about it. In terms of buy-in, you need the profession to be volunteering to serve on the council and committees. You need to have the profession at least to cooperate and not to become active members of the resistance. However, and I've had the joy and privilege of working with talented and committee professional members who are genuinely trying to protect the public in a reasonable way, and it's just been an amazing part of my experience. But in recent years, I've been having to start to have a few doubts about this that have been creeping into my thinking. There have been some decisions I've witnessed, and here I'm talking about all regulators, I'm not talking about the college here, that have puzzled me from the public interest perspective occasionally. I've sat through council meetings, and I haven't sat through any council meetings here, so this is not about you, but I had sat through council meetings where hours were spent on what really on any objective matter would be viewed as marginally related to the public interest. And on rare occasions, I've seen regulators be politicized with a small p in terms of some of their regulatory activities and structures. So perhaps it is time to have a larger discussion on having a truly merit-based method of selection of both public and professional members. And perhaps having that being combined with an oversight by an independent external body that has credibility. Keeping in mind that government appointment and merit-based selection are not necessarily the same thing. And certainly we've seen in the US where most of the regulatory boards are appointed by government or their state legislatures, that they've had serious issues of their own. So that's not a magical solution. Teresa Boyle published a very thoughtful piece on this a few weeks ago in your newspaper, Kathy, that I thought, and I continue to think is a worthwhile read for everyone in the room, about this debate of how really should regulators be structured and how they should be selected. And I think it's time to have a bit of a discussion about this.
Makes a lot of sense.
Thank you, Richard. Kathy, as you may know, we have undertaken a public awareness initiative as a college over a few years to try and raise awareness, and we hope in part understanding among members of the public about what we do. In part, some of the coverage that we receive through the media has helped fuel that awareness. It may not always be positive coverage, but it has put the college and some of our work and our regulatory mandate in the public eye. And I'm thoughtful about Jan's comment about the regulator and striving to be well known, that to a certain extent it will be forever thus that we're not as well known, certainly by the informed public, maybe not more broadly. And I do have a question. So thinking about that, what do you see as what regulatory bodies should be doing to raise more awareness, and I would say more awareness and more understanding, I think distinct issues. And to what end? So to what purpose, or for what purpose?
I'm a big believer in telling the public that we have regulatory bodies. And so the way it works for us is, as a public editor, it's like an ombudsman position. I deal with all the complaints. But if people aren't happy with the way I've resolved it, they can go to the National News Media Council. The National News Media Council is the industry's regulating body. It's half professional members and half public members. And journalists in-house are always aghast at me when they see my notes, when I respond to the person and I say, this is what I've decided, and please understand if you're not happy with my decision, here's the information to take it to the National News Media Council. So I'm always welcoming the public to do that, and journalists in-house are sort of going like, yeah, then we're going to have to go to the press council. But, to me, it's telling people that we exist, that there is self-regulation, that we take it seriously, and I don't think we can tell people enough that it's there, that, an aggrieved person, whether, that's a parent or somebody who has, a serious complaint, they shouldn't have to search around to figure out what they can do about it. I would sort of even advocate, is there a system in schools? And I don't know how it works, but, are the schools very open that, if you're not happy with a decision here, here's what you can do? And, is that part of information that goes to parents and communities on a regular basis? So that, raising public awareness is important. I think that also goes to the trust piece. And I think that creating understanding that maybe, I don't even know if we've had you guys in for an ed board. Have we, coming into the editorial board and making your case on here's how we operate and here's how we hold ourselves to account? And
an invitation?
I am not on the ed board, so I can't make that decision, but I could certainly put you in touch with the right people. But yes, let's face it, the Toronto Star, as a progressive news organization, is going to report on education and teachers. And I think the belief is that, certainly if we're trying to define public interest, education, our children, there's nothing more in the public interest. So it's a legitimate source of reporting. I know everybody doesn't always see eye to eye, so there is room to create understanding. And I know you guys have done lots to do that too.
We've certainly started down that path. Thank you for the answer and for the invitation. I'm going to take it as one anyway.
So Kathy, as a next step, beyond stating that we exist, how do you think regulators should explain our roles to the public? And in our case, the parents.
Right. Well, certainly in as simple language as possible, try and, make sure it's not jargon-filled and that's something that's complicated. And, particularly increasingly in, our multicultural society where people are coming from other countries and just, I think that making it as unbureaucratic as possible for people, accessible, is what's going to matter. And again, you have an outlet to reach families every single day. So, through the schools, through communications.
Thank you. We've reached the final portion. So one final question for all of you and an invitation to offer a parting thought or comment. If we were doing everything we could to serve and protect the public interest, how different would our organizations look and how might we be perceived?
That's a hard question. You guys start.
Let it out. Who wants to rock?
Looks like you're on the hot spot, Jen.
Rock, paper, scissors. There we go. I'll start with
It's like an essay question.
It is. It's stated like that, isn't it? So I guess I'd circle back to what I was speaking about earlier. I would say that you need to understand, or we as regulators need to understand the risks in practice related to the profession that we have the privilege to oversee deeply. We need to understand those deeply. We need to publish them. We need to talk about those risks. We need to focus on them in terms of what our public policy and our debates are at our council should be about what we've identified in that regard. And we need to look at what mitigation is about. I think that we've been too siloed and too inward around how we've looked at our solutions related to that. And so I think I'd suggest that we need to be more partnered in what that's about, whether it's with broader regulatory community or whether it's with groups within that particular professional context. But I think that there are varied solutions, and as much as we need a well-honed toolbox of our own, I think we need to think imaginatively and innovatively around it. And we need to talk about them. And we need to speak openly about what our challenges are so that the public understand about that. And to me, if that's what we're about and that's what we're focused on and that's how we're describing what we do, then we're going to earn our trustworthiness around our competency and our honesty and our reliability.
Jan, just before the our next panelist responds, when you spoke about understanding our risks, publishing them, focusing on them. Recently, at an event I was at and that you were at as well, someone challenged me on that and said, "How can you talk about the public? How can you talk about inspiring public confidence if you're only going to speak about or you're going to focus on the risks, which the public may not see as inspiring confidence?" Can you give the answer I should have given to that person?
Yeah, I think you're a problem. We're trying to going around in circles. I think there are two sides of a story. I think that people, unfortunately, across the board of all walks, look to regulators for a compliance story. And although we have that, it's a very small part of our story. I think our story is really about the quality and safety of a profession. It's a much bigger story. So do I think that we have that to tell, which should inspire confidence? Because very, very little of what goes on in the regulatory day-to-day business is about the majority in discipline. It's about the minority in that sector. So we've got a much bigger story to tell, but we don't have all the answers, and we haven't done a good job, I don't think, personally, and I'm in those organizations as well, as shining a light, though, on what we're troubled about. And so I just think it needs to really be a balanced conversation about compliance, about quality and safety, and about what do we need to be thinking about and how do we figure it out.
Thank you.
In terms of the questions about look and perception, in terms of look, I think the regulator, the boards and committees would be leaner. They'd be focused on its public interest mandate. They'd be engaging in an open policy analysis approach, and they'd be transparent in their regulatory activities in terms of complaints and discipline. And just to give you one small example, most regulators now have a pretty decent public register that has information about their practitioners, and certainly there's room to grow that. But why do you have to know the name of the regulatory body and find their website to find that? Why is there not one website for all of Ontario, for every profession, that that would be published, and you could go to, I want to check my practitioner, this is the website. I bet you that could be done with minimal government costs, and they could probably pass it on to the regulators. And then we could start talking about having a national database. I mean, that's the kind of thing that I think it would look like. And if we had that, the perception of the public, the conversation would change. Instead of the conversation be about the merits of the policy decisions being made by the college and the merits of the regulatory decisions being made by the college. And they might disagree, but at least it'd be about the merits of the decisions being made, rather than whether the regulatory body is self-serving or not, which is where way too much of the media debate right now is about regulators. So if we could shift that debate through actions like we've talked about today, I think that would be a huge plus.
That's great. I love that idea of one website for all. The media would love that.
Oh, okay, yes.
So I'll speak to the last part. How might we be perceived if you were doing all the right things? I think that first of all, people would have the confidence that a body exists, that they know you're going to do what's right. So I really like those words that Jan used: competence, honesty, and reliability, that people having the confidence to know that that's why you exist, that you don't exist to protect a teacher, to protect the profession, that you exist to serve the public, and that, that goes for any regulatory body, I think, and that, people really can understand and have confidence that we're going to do what we say we're going to do.
So I'd like to thank all of you on behalf of council, our staff, and the membership for your time, your interest, your clear expertise, and your honesty as well. Change begins with reflection and discourse, so thank you for igniting that this evening.
Appreciate it. No, you guys should come in. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you.
So Laura doesn't have any more speaking notes, so I'm going to move on to my report. So good evening, everyone. Ani, bonsoir, merci, wache. Thank you for joining us. I'm Angela De Palma, and I'm Chair of Council of the Ontario College of Teachers. You may have heard that in 2017, the college actually celebrated 20 years. So that's when 20 is worth celebrating. 20 years of protecting and serving the public interest. During those years, elected and appointed council members have been actively engaged in the self-regulation of the teaching profession in Ontario. Your council is knowledgeable, experienced, and dedicated to governing the profession. So dedicated that many traveled from across the province to be here tonight to engage with you. The 37 members of our council conduct themselves with transparency and accountability. They give advice and make decisions with intention, decisions grounded in leadership that is thoughtful, strategic, and prudent. L'été dernier, nous avons...
Last summer, we met members of the college and the public as part of our discussion groups. We wanted to determine what they knew about the order's mandate, and we also wanted to know how, as a regulator of the teaching profession, could better meet their needs. Those focus groups took place in French and in English in Ottawa, Kingston, London, Sudbury, Toronto, and St. Catharines. We chose those cities in order to ensure diversity in terms of geography, demography, and linguistics.
Members of the public and teachers gave us feedback on future professional advisory topics. On that note, the Executive Committee, which selects topics and helps shape the framework of professional advisories, approved an advisory on responding to the bullying of students. The committee also approved to update the advisory on the duty to report. I think you'll be pleased to know that the next advisory will address supporting students with mental health needs. In focus group sessions, both parents and teachers said that this topic was a priority and education stakeholder input on the topic would be valuable. Did you know that the College Council welcomes presentations from individuals and organizations to be delivered during council meetings and meetings such as this one? And I think we have among us someone who's made one of those presentations. We often have presenters discussing topics related to the college's work or activities, as you'll hear tonight. In order to improve communications, the Executive Committee reviewed a protocol around these presentations and suggested some amendments in 2017 to reinforce their value and their relevance to the college's mandate. There are 14 council committees, and all of these committees are composed of elected and appointed members. When there is a vacancy in a committee, Filling the vacancy helps minimize risk to our mandate, and we've heard a little bit about risk already. That's also the role of the Executive Committee. The committee made several appointments throughout the year to fill a number of committee vacancies. We were proud this year to recognize 3 accomplished and committed teacher candidates with our annual Ontario College of Teachers Scholarship Program referenced in our bylaws. This program honors excellence in teacher education and financially assists future teachers. Devin Kernaghan was this year's recipient of the Joseph W. Atkinson Scholarship for Excellence in Teacher Education. A little background on Devin. He is known for his resiliency, generosity, empathy, and motivation. He overcame a brain injury while playing football in high school to succeed both academically and in varsity sports. As an academic assistant and peer tutor, he's known for making meaningful contributions to his campus community. We also recognize Nicole Billington, the recipient of the Ontario College of Teachers Primary Junior or Junior Intermediate Scholarship. Described by her professors as a patient, passionate, and dedicated leader with a kind heart, she has served as a tutor and as a teaching assistant. She worked in a psychology laboratory as a research assistant focused on children and maltreatment. And our third finalist, Kara Nagel, is the recipient of the Ontario College of Teachers Intermediate Senior Scholarship. She is known for her compassionate and spunky personality and for building connections with students so they feel included and respected. She persevered through life challenges, including homelessness and mental illness, to become a great advocate for mental health. I'm very thankful for those council members who served on the scholarship subcommittee, in addition to their other college committee commitments, and read many compelling applications before offering their recommendations. The past year saw several departures and appointments within Council. Those who concluded their very distinguished service with us include appointed members Marie-Louise Chartrand in October and Robert Gagné in November. Claudia Patenaude-Daniels was appointed to replace elected member William Gassam, who left Council in the fall of 2016. Public members Marlène Marois and Michelle Miner-Seal were appointed in November 2017. Jean-Luc Bernard was appointed for another year, and Elizabeth Edgar Webb-Kemigad, Godwin Ifedi, and Rana Warsh were appointed for 3 more years. Council members and college staff show commitment to the profession every day through the expertise and the care they bring to their duties. I'd like to offer my gratitude to all of them for the many ways in which they contribute to the public interest, and I'd also like to offer my gratitude to those of you joining us tonight in person and through the live stream. We're glad you're here, and we hope you return next year. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.
We're now going to hear from some of our committee chairs and who are going to share some of their committee activity reports. And our first speaker is Mireille Loubert, who is the chair of our editorial board. And I believe Mireille is going to make remarks on behalf of the editorial board and also on behalf of one of her colleagues, but we'll wait until she's finished her editorial board report, one at a time.
Good evening and bonsoir. My name is Mireille Loubert, and I'm the vice chair of the College Council and the chair of the editorial board. I'm also a full-time teacher with le Conseil des écoles catholiques du Centre-Est d'Ottawa. The committee also includes appointed council members Jean-Luc Bernard and Godwin Ifedi, and elected members Tim Kernstein and Anthony Samchek.
We're very proud of our magazine, Professionally Speaking, Pour Parler Profession, Those publications offer inspiring stories about our members across the province and deal with trends in education and regulation. They offer substantive articles, analysis, and relevant resources for professional development. And they also contain pieces about remarkable teachers who've had an influence in the life of famous Canadians.
The mandate of the magazine is to inform members, like many of you in this room and watching online, about the activities and decisions of the college. For example, the Governing Yourself section, best known as the Blue Pages, inform members of legal and regulatory matters affecting the profession. The editorial board is responsible for setting editorial and advertising policy for the magazine. My colleagues and I review content before it's published and provide input into future editions. In the spring of this year, we sent out latest survey to 16,000 randomly selected English-speaking members in good standing and 3,000 randomly selected French-speaking members in good standing as well. As readers' preference change, we want to evolve the magazine to ensure members are engaged and satisfied with their professional publication. Merci. I'll be right back.
Thank you very much, Mireille. Mireille is going to make a second report this evening as a member of the Registration Appeals Committee. Brian Beal is the chair of that committee, and he's unable to be with us this evening.
So you're really lucky you get to hear my charming accent again. That's what you wanted to say, Michael?
Yes, and I hope this report will be as intriguing as your previous one. I look forward to it.
Okay, well, I'm not Brian Beal, and I'm not the chair of the Registration Appeal Committee. So I'm Mireille Loubert, and I'm the vice chair of that committee. It also includes elected council members Sarah Noemi, and appointed members Jean-Luc Bernard and Elizabeth Edgar with Kamiga. Good. Okay. The main role of our committee is to hear appeals from unsuccessful applicants who have not been granted membership in the college or who have had conditions placed on their certificate of qualification and registration, which is the teaching license. Our committee offers a transparent and independent appeal process, which enhances public confidence that the teaching profession treats all applicants fairly and objectively. The majority of these appeals were from applicants who were denied certification. So you might think, okay, what happens when applicants who were denied certification appeal? Well, let me tell you. We review each case and assess the applicant's qualifications against college registration criteria. Applicants can share written submissions to us or make an oral presentation if they wish to do so. What happened next? Well, we can uphold the original decision or direct the college to issue teaching certificates. We can also direct the college to issue certificates with specific terms, conditions, or limitations. Or we can simply direct the college to refuse to issue a certificate because the individual doesn't meet the certification requirements. Like not completing a teacher education program or not providing evidence that they have English or French language proficiency. A few statistics. Sorry, it's quite long, eh?
No, that's...
Holy. Mine was shorter.
Take a break. You can take a break there. You can stretch.
Yeah, and I wasn't supposed to start till 6:35, so I was not prepared. Okay. Let's take a short break. Okay, anyway, I'm just about done. Don't give up. At the back there. You okay? Good. Okay, a few statistics. We may be interested to know, you may be interested to know because I already know, that in 2017, that's true. I promise I was not going to do that tonight. I'm in big trouble. But this is the last one anyway, so I'm gone. Okay, the committee received 28 appeals and rendered 21 decisions. We were really busy. We upheld the original decision in 18 cases, overturned 2 decisions, and modified 1. 21% of appeals were received from individuals who completed their teacher education in Ontario, and 79% were from outside of Canada. There were no appeals from individuals who were applying from other Canadian provinces or territories. There was a total of 6,002 applications for college membership in 2017. A total of 173 applicants were denied membership. Only 16% of the 173 denied applicants appealed the registrar's decision to the committee. Finally, we heard 8 oral presentations in 2017, 5 in person and 3 via video conference. Merci, and have a great evening.
Thank you very much, Mireille. I think you surpassed our expectations this evening, so thank you. Next, we'll hear from the chair of the Quality Assurance Committee, Bill Petrie, who will provide a report on behalf of the committee. I know it's a hard act to follow, but I'm sure you won't disappoint us, Bill.
Sure you've all been waiting for this. Good evening and bonsoir. I murdered that. Je ne suis pas bilingue, believe it or not. I'm Bill Petrie, and I am Vice Chair of the Quality Assurance Committee, and our chairperson is Robert Ryan, who's sitting over there. The provincial government appointed me to the College Council in 2015. Now, the committee also includes Robert Michaud and Nicole Van Woutenberg and appointed member Tom Potter, so make sure you wrote that down. Our committee was established 20 years ago by the College Council. Our main role is to ensure that the college protects the public interest efficiently. But what does it mean to protect the public interest? It means that the college regulates Ontario's teaching profession so the public can be confident that practitioners put students' well-being and academic success first. For any teacher in the room, you share with this a strong commitment to providing the best education possible to Ontario students. Well, the college was established to act on behalf of the teaching profession in fulfilling this commitment. I won't be talking too legally here. I am not a lawyer. But in a nutshell, the college has 11 objects as defined in the Ontario College of Teachers Act. Objects are the essential duties of the college. For example, enforcing professional standards for our members is one duty, and we are accountable to the public on how we carry out that duty. The role of our committee is to review the performance of the college relative to these 11 objects and also to the college's 4 strategic priorities. In 2017, the committee was pleased to review presentations from various college departments and units that demonstrated how their work and the work of the council committees they support meet the objects in the strategic priorities. Presentations range from communications initiatives, financial quality assurance measures, to legislation drafting and efforts related to student safety. For example, as the chair and the registrar mentioned earlier, the college celebrated 20 years of protecting the public interest, 20 years of setting the standard for great teaching. There you go. It's actually around that tagline, setting the standard for great teaching, that the college has made significant strides in educating the public about who we are as a regulatory body. Since 2012, public awareness levels of who we are and what we do have gone up, and this is because of the incredible amount of outreach the college has done to engage parents. Of our most recent survey says 83% of those surveyed can identify the college as setting ethical standards for teachers. The college mandates require that we communicate with the public on behalf of the profession, and the college has recognized this priority. I'll be pleased to address any questions you have submitted during the question and answer session. Thank you. Merci.
Thanks very much, Bill, and I misspoke earlier. Bill is the vice chair of the Quality Assurance Committee, and Robert Ryan is the chair of the committee. And Kathy English said that it's a good thing to admit when you make mistakes because it inspires confidence, and so I'm really hitting it out of the park. Our next speaker is Robert Ryan, who is going to speak to us on behalf of the Investigation Committee. Welcome, Rob.
Bill's fault. He moved the mic. Okay, good evening. Bonsoir. Bonjour. I am Robert Ryan. I'm the chair of the Investigation Committee. I've been a high school teacher, or special education teacher in Windsor since 1999. I was first elected to the College Council in 2009 and served for 3 years. In 2015, I was elected again for 3 years. The committee also includes elected council members Pierre-Olivier Arsenault, Tim Gernstein, Anthony Samchuk, Jacqueline Kazmaier, and appointed members James Canup, Michelle Miner-Seal, and Bill Petrie. The main role of our committee is to investigate complaints about college members related to professional misconduct, incompetence, or incapacity. Basically, we get to decide how to properly deal with complaints. Now let's do a little exercise where you get to decide what you would do with a complaint. Now we've altered the details to respect confidentiality, so here let's go. Listen up, it's really important. One day, a school board reported to the college a high school teacher who acknowledged that he failed to adequately supervise students during a school trip to Cuba. I never went to Cuba. He did not perform nighttime supervision in a consistent and vigilant manner. He also allowed students to consume alcohol in their rooms. What would you do? Would you refer the matter to the discipline committee for a discipline hearing or not? Anybody have any ideas of what you would do if you were on the committee? Nobody's going to speak. Oh, okay. So the outcome from the investigation committee was the committee members decided not to refer the matter. However, they admonished the member in writing because they were seriously concerned that the teacher failed to adequately supervise the student on that trip. Overall, in 2017, our committee disposed of 347 complaints. Now that's busy. You would be interesting to know that the college receives about 1,000 contacts annually from teachers and the public who raise issues about college members. About half are resolved appropriately at the school board. The other half are resolved by the college and our committee. Although another highlight that you would be interested to know is that in 2016, the provincial government passed the Protecting Students Act. This bill is important because it brings long-sought changes into law to protect students even more. We have been implementing these changes. For example, in cases where a member is found guilty of a significant crime, our committee can, with the member's agreement, expedite the matter to the discipline committee. There are also mandatory penalties for acts of professional misconduct related to sexual abuse of a student. The bill represents our commitment to improve our investigation and hearings processes and practices to be more efficient and open. I will be pleased to address any questions you have submitted during the question and answer session. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you very much, Rob, and to all of our committee chairs and vice chairs for your reports. It's my pleasure to make a report to you as Registrar of the Ontario College of Teachers, the province's regulator for the teaching profession. And as I was listening to our speakers earlier on the panel talk about the importance of increasing awareness and of understanding, I hope that this report helps us to become more aware of the college's mandate, of the role that we play in protecting the public interest and inspiring public confidence. And I'm very pleased that we have a number of members and others who are following along with our live stream online and also helping us to enhance awareness among our various publics. As you know, we certify teachers for schools in the province of Ontario It's our responsibility and our privilege to license teachers, school and system leaders, and others working in education roles for which a certificate of qualification and registration is required. I, too, am one of the almost 236,000 proud Ontario certified teachers. The Ontario College of Teachers sets the standards of practice and the ethical standards of the teaching profession. And it's also our organization that approves teacher education programs at the universities in Ontario, as well as the courses that teachers take to continue to increase their knowledge and skill. We're also the body responsible, as Rob has just outlined, to investigate and resolve complaints against members in those rare circumstances where a member of the college fails to uphold our high standards. For the next couple of minutes, I'd like to give you a quick overview of some of our accomplishments in 2017, but for a closer and more detailed look at our work, I would invite you to please visit our website at oct.ca to see our annual report. Those of you online on live streaming, you can do that perhaps simultaneously. 2017 was certainly an important year for the profession. Teachers celebrated, as you've heard this evening, 20 years of self-regulation, the privilege of self-regulation, and having the ability to self-govern in the public interest. Working on behalf of the public is indeed a privilege that we take seriously. That's why care and judgment, two cornerstones in the foundation of teachers' daily practice, also guide our work. For example, last year we provided new and updated professional advisories to teachers on two important and timely topics: student bullying and appropriate use of social media and electronic communication. Our professional advisories are, as the name suggests, advice to our members to help them enhance their professional judgment and make decisions in their practice. With respect to our advisory on bullying, we know that students can't learn if they're being bullied, if they're being intimidated. And teachers can't help if they're unaware that it's going on, or if they're not sure what to do when it does happen. That's why we gave advice to them to help them in their thinking about how to respond. The advisory provides a context for discussion and action. Through self-reflection, it helps teachers to intervene early, support students, promote disclosure, provide guidance, and review protocols. Our professional advisory on maintaining professionalism in the use of electronic and social media also struck a very positive chord among parents and educators. We first introduced the advisory in 2011 and updated and redistributed it in 2017. Along with a broader definition and current examples, the advisory makes it clear that we encourage social media and electronic communication to enhance the teaching and learning process. All of our college advisories are built on the ethical standards of care, respect, trust, and integrity. The issues, however, are often societal in nature and require help from the whole community, which is why we have discussions at the community level. For example, when we launched the advisory on bullying, we hosted panel discussions in 6 Ontario communities. These included representatives from local police services, school boards, and community agencies, all with a stake in bullying prevention and intervention. And you can see some of those community members, along with our chair and our deputy registrar, at one of our sessions. In
2017, we also developed and examined, as well as updated, the courses that lead to additional qualifications. These courses allow teachers to acquire new knowledge and to strengthen their skills throughout their career. We also approved guidelines for a whole series of courses, including business and commerce, supporting Aboriginal understanding, Aboriginal learning, holistic health and education, 7th and 8th years. We also approved a number of guidelines, including class management, biology, chemistry, dance, drama, adapting the program for the Catholic system, studies for First Nations, Métis, and Inuits, adapting the program for second language students, teaching to LGBTQ students, safe and inclusive schools, and teaching gifted children. We also examined the programs to train teachers at the universities of Western, Windsor, Nipissing, Wilfrid Laurier, York, and Laurentian. These programs allow new members to develop the skills, knowledge, and critical judgment they require to exercise their profession. We visited the faculties of education and spoke to students regarding ethics and standards for the teaching profession.
Our Director of Standards of Practice and Accreditation, making a presentation to those students in the Faculty of Education. Our commitment to student safety and welfare and the public interest was also evident in our work to implement the Protecting Students Act. Internally, we applied care and judgment in the development and review of practices and policies, such as our diversity and inclusion policy. We're happy to say, once again, that we celebrated our 20th year as a regulator of the teaching profession in Ontario. With continued foresight and resolve, we expect to see another 20 years dedication to improving teacher professionalism in the public interest. And we have some images of our 20th celebration, our anniversary celebration. Our priorities are clear, our leadership is sound, our staff is dedicated, and our regulatory partners are supportive. We need all of these things to be successful, and we look forward certainly to the year ahead. Thank you very much. Merci. We are now at the portion of the evening where we'd be happy to take your questions or your comments. And our speaker is here to assist us with our timing. We have a number of individuals following along online with our live stream, and they have the capacity to submit questions to us electronically, which we'll receive and I believe be able to display. Those of you who are here with us, also there are, Kathy's waving one of our baskets. We have pages for you to fill up to indicate your question, and if you would submit them to Kathy, we also are pleased to take those questions from the floor. And we received a few questions in advance since we let our members know that we would be having our meeting this evening. And so I think Angela and I will begin maybe with some of those questions, and then we'll take the questions from you here or from our college members and other interested parties online.
Okay, so the first question states, teachers go by names that are different from what has been listed on the OCT website. It makes it impossible to find a teacher. Can there be a motion put forward to list teachers' names exactly as they are listed on the OCT site in school agendas and other forms of communication? So I know that there is a requirement in bylaw that members practice under their registered name. Registrar, did you have something to add to that?
I mean, when we received this one, I think in advance, we had a chance to look more closely at the information that we have. And so we do encourage members to verify the name that we have with them. We do that annually when we send out the certificate package, encouraging members to check all of the information and to make sure that the name that we have, the common name with which we communicate with them, as well as the name our public register, is accurate, with the understanding that they would practice under that name. And I think when we look at a rationale, if a parent or a member of the public wishes to see the qualifications of his or her child's teacher, to see how highly qualified they are, they need to be able to find them in the public register. Again, in those rare circumstances where a member might have a concern about a member, they should also be able to find that member and make that concern known to us and through us to the member. As Richard Steinecke, said earlier, the notion about a public register for all professionals, again, that would be predicated on the fact that the names are accurate so that members of the public can find them. And so it's certainly an expectation, and I think, in that question, can there be, we will continue to remind members as we do through the annual certificate renewal process, but I think we can also do that through our magazine and other ways, not only talk about the requirement, but the rationale behind it, why it's helpful in the public interest and inspiring public confidence. So So the next question, it's just difficult to stay out of the light, but still here by the microphone, so I'm going to move over a little bit. Why did the council find it necessary to set the reinstatement fee for teachers at $130? So just to begin with, the reinstatement fee, for those of you who might not be familiar with it, it's a fee that the college levies when a member has allowed their membership to lapse, and so instead of paying the $150 membership fee in a given year, for lots of reasons, a member may choose to let that lapse or may forget to pay their fee. In order to reinstate with the college, they must pay a $130 fee for us to reinstate them. In essence, that fee is set at a level to be reasonable to members, but to also help us to recover the costs that are necessary in reinstating that member and bringing them back to good standing. I think also inherent in that fee is our annual revenue, our revenue for the college comes from primarily from member fees, and we try to predict each year how many members will renew or keep their membership so that we can determine what the membership fee should be for everyone. If the reinstatement fee, and I'm inferring from the question that someone might be thinking it should be lower, if it were lower, it wouldn't necessarily encourage members to continue to pay that fee in years where they may be away. And if we were unable to predict the amount, it would be much more challenging to set an annual budget. But that said, we also try to set it at a fee that's not going to place an undue burden on a member who wishes to return to good standing.
Third question is, what does protect the public interest include and exclude without being biased or detrimental to individuals within the educational framework? So as far as the definition of the public interest, it is a broad definition, likely purposefully broad, and that's to really direct us to the greater good of education, and at the center of that is the student. The other education stakeholders, they each have their own function, apart from protecting the public interest, which they do very well. So as one example, we have the Ministry of Education who develops a curriculum. We have teacher associations who advocate for members. And council members, before beginning to serve on council, they do take an oath to protect the public interest, and that includes not being consciously influenced by any biases that could influence their decision making. And it's something when they come to the council table that they're really mindful of, and that they assure, that in fact, if they did have some sort of conflict of interest, or they felt that that was there, or that it could be perceived to be a conflict of interest, then they recognize that they have an obligation to announce that and then excuse themselves from that part of a discussion. And Michael, did you have further addition?
Just to add to your excellent response, and you've heard me say this when we were out together visiting faculties of education and talking to new teacher candidates, I think very much so the student is at the heart of the public interest in our context in the teaching profession. It may be different when we unpack the public interest for the College of Veterinarians or for dietitians. But for us, the student is at the center of that, and I think very much student well-being, student welfare, safety, and having meaningful learning opportunities when they're in the care of our members is really at the heart of the public interest. And I think when we look at some of the work that we do, the public has other interests, but that all, I think, have an impact on the student. And so the quality of our teacher education programs, the public has an interest in knowing that teacher education programs are rigorous, that they introduce teacher candidates to theory and practice, to different ways of knowing and being, so that when they are in the classroom, they can provide students with those meaningful learning opportunities. So there are, I think, a number of secondary, perhaps, ways of looking at the public interest, but that all have an impact, again, on student well-being and on student welfare.
Does anyone see anything wrong with only 3.4% of members voting in this year's election? What is OCT doing to engage members other than bombarding members with reminders to vote? Do you think the OCT lavish office location, trying to constantly raise fees and engaging in more and more non-required activities, have anything to do with member engagement? Disengagement, sorry, thank you. See, I was already thinking of trying to think of the glasses half full. So certainly the governance committee has been really focusing on trying to increase member engagement, in particular over this term, because the governance committee is a new committee. And one of the first items that they discussed when they met as a committee was member engagement. And it is something that we do take very seriously and something that we've been interested in increasing. And one of the initiatives that the governance committee directed to the college to move towards, and that staff very capably supported, was a series of regional sessions. And those included sessions to encourage candidates to actually run for candidacy and serve the profession at the college, and also to a series of sessions to encourage members to vote. So those were two new initiatives. And certainly, those are some things that now we can reflect on and look back to see how effective they were to gauge any next steps. We know that voter turnout for our regulatory bodies is generally on the lower side, and I see Jan nodding a little bit, so I think she can relate from the College of Veterinarians. Hopefully it is something that will continue to increase. And, voting is really, the reminders to vote is a general strategy that is used to encourage people to vote. Hopefully not everyone felt bombarded, but certainly the data does show that those emails that go out and the encouragement to vote that gets in the Professionally Speaking magazine, they do result in more members voting. So likely those are tactics that would continue. And again, I pass it over to Michael to add.
I don't have much to add, except to say that I am disappointed with the voter turnout, and we certainly do take that serious and look at it. And I would welcome from members like this and others strategies to help us better engage and to hear from you about why some may be disengaged and what we can do about that, so that we can look for some solutions. And I've had conversations with my good regulatory colleagues like Jan and others about the percentage of those voting in their elections. Some do have higher voter turnout, and I've asked them what they attribute that to, so that we can learn from them as well about ways to make sure that members see the value in voting for their council members. Why are members no longer allowed to ask questions live at the annual meeting? Well, I would say members are encouraged to ask questions live, like this one, at the meeting. What we have done since we've moved to a web streaming format, we want to have access for all members to ask questions in a similar way. And so those online are encouraged to do so and have to submit their questions in writing. And so we've also moved to that for those who are here to do the same and provide those to us so that we can show them on the screen, so that those at home or wherever they are online are able to see the questions and hear the answer. I'd also submit, and have done a number of annual meetings of members, we're able to answer more questions when we ask members to write them down and to have clear and concise questions. Sometimes taking them from the floor does involve, for some members, providing context or comments, and sometimes the actual articulation of the question and the words around it can be longer than the answer. And so this allows us to take more questions, and we continue to encourage you to send us your questions live. And as you can see from the questions, we're not censoring them. We're receiving them as we would otherwise. Angela, anything further?
Just wanted to add, too, that we took an opportunity last year, even when time did run out, so that we weren't able to respond to all the questions submitted. We did take an opportunity to collate them and ensure that they were responded to, and those answers appeared on the college website. So should that occur this evening, please do go to the college website to seek the answers to those questions. What is the college doing to ensure ongoing professional development by its members? Are you offering accessible education, including seminars, workshops, courses, etc.? Emails are helpful, by the way, but I find there aren't enough offered. So the college does have a professional learning framework that lists or includes a number of the activities that college members pursue each year, and those range from additional qualification courses to conferences, to seminars, to professional learning communities with their colleagues. And the college accredits additional qualification courses through its Standards of Practice and Education Committee, but it wouldn't be the body who would really host seminars or workshops that would help members with their ongoing professional learning.
No, well, we're certainly glad to hear that the emails or e-belt bulletins are helpful. That's your college and you, and glad to know that that's helpful. And I think just to add to what Angela has suggested, in our mandate, our object, we have the authority and the responsibility to provide for the ongoing education of our members. That doesn't mean that we are the provider of those ongoing courses, and we achieve that in part by accrediting, by developing the guidelines for, I think, over 400 additional qualification courses, and then through the good work of our folks in the Standards of Practice and Accreditation Department, approving providers who develop course outlines based on those. We also, through the magazine and through our e-bulletins, we endeavor to make members aware of other opportunities for professional learning, where some may advertise with us, or we may become aware of conferences, institutes, summer institutes offered by teacher federations or by employers, or other opportunities, and we'll continue to do that. We know that ongoing professional learning is essential in order to inspire public confidence for us as members of the profession, to renew ourselves professionally. And the only other comment that I might make there is we do offer once every 2 years the Inspiring Public Confidence Conference that we just held last week on Thursday and Friday. Primarily a conference for other regulators, for people doing the same work that we do, but there's also a stream on teacher education and focusing on research and innovation in that regard, but also sessions for the public and for members that members might find of use. And certainly anyone who's interested and didn't attend the conference can also access some of the presentations that were made there. Is the college doing anything or being effective in ensuring its members are employed in the relevant field? And I think this is a question that we have every year, and I understand the reason that we have this every year. Members of the profession undergo teacher education, a significant amount of time and commitment, and then want to be able to practice. They want to be able to share their care, respect, and integrity, trust with students. So we understand that. Employment is not a responsibility that's within the mandate of the Ontario College of Teachers. So that said, we are doing some things on that periphery, and I don't think that we're coloring outside the lines in that regard. One of the things that we do, and we have been doing for, I think, 12 or 13 years, is conducting a longitudinal study called the Transition to Teaching Study that looks at the early employment and early career experiences of teachers and asks them about their access to the job market. And we compare these data over this 12 or 13-year period. The report's available on our website. I think the March issue of Professionally Speaking spoke about the report, and it provides information to those seeking employment about their job prospects. Not only generally what are the prospects, and they have vastly improved in the 2017 report, where 5 years ago we were saying 3/4 of those who responded said that they were unable to find employment or they were underemployed. That's turned around to, I think, where we're saying almost 3/4 of those who responded said they were able to find employment. But we also provide information on whether your prospects for finding employment are improved if you have qualifications in a particular area. For example, to teach in French language schools, to teach French as a second language. Does it make a difference if you're certified to teach at the intermediate level or the primary junior level? So I think that those data are helpful to those who are seeking employment. We have a couple of links on our website, I think Jobs in Education, and a couple of others, perhaps Apply to Teach, where there is some information on those who are recruiting teachers. Angela, anything that,
College staff are also actively engaged in consultations that the Ministry of Education holds when the different stakeholders are gathered to get input or offer input into a topic, including teachers who are unemployed. So that's another opportunity for them to be able to be effective in ensuring some improvement when there are opportunities.
Great benefit in going back and forth, because I thought of something else while I was back there. Now I've forgotten it, but it's going to come back to me. We also have courses. Among our additional qualification courses, there are some that are conceived of and really there to help members find employment. So we have one called An Orientation to Teaching in Ontario, designed specifically for internationally educated teachers who come to Ontario, and we know from our survey have the most difficult time in finding employment. And so that course looks at what is the culture of an Ontario school, what are some of the norms, and helps members to understand that. In our membership services area, we have 4 sessions that we offer on a monthly basis here at the college, and they're also available online. And the last one, it helps them to understand their certificate, and we also often have an employer, someone from a district school board, come and speak to those newly certified members directly about applying for jobs. So it's not a college presentation, but we know there's value in that, and so we explain the certificate, and they often then talk about, from the hiring point of view, how does an employer look at the certificate? The other element that we've introduced this year is a webinar for employers, and one of the elements in the webinar is understanding certificates that have conditions on them. So again, employers see a certificate, you're in good standing, and then see a certificate that says good standing subject to terms, conditions, and limitations, and often that was an impediment or an obstacle to employment. We've done webinars with employers to help them understand that both of those candidates with those types of certificates are eligible to teach. One simply had gaps in their program because they came from another jurisdiction, and they have 5 years to satisfy those conditions. So we hope that those measures are also helping members to seek and find employment in their relevant fields. And the last thing that I would say, because of the work that we're doing right now with our partners, is also in shortage areas. We're also identifying where are there shortages. And we know right now in the area of French second language, Core French Extended and Immersion, as well as our Francophone for teaching in French language schools, we have a shortage. So we're making that known not only to members, but also to our partners, and saying in teacher education programs, we're not meeting the demand. And so what can we do to make sure that we have programs that are also responding to a certain degree to need? Well, very timely question. Why can't the annual meeting of members be held at a time more accessible to members? I'm assuming that this time is not a good time for members. We do hold it in the evening because we know that many members are employed and teaching during the day. If this person, it's not time to go yet. We have in the past, I believe, had the annual meeting of members on a weekend. We didn't see that there was any significant difference in the number of members that attend. So again, I'm inferring from this, question that this should be either later in the evening or not on a weeknight. But if the person is online and has a suggestion for what is a more accessible time, we'd be glad to hear that. And Angela, any insight?
Sure.
Yeah.
The regional sessions that I described earlier that the governance committee recommended, the first series of sessions were held, I think they started at, I can't remember if it was 4 or 5 o'clock, and we did find that they were not as well attended as we had hoped. So then when the next series of regional sessions, those were going to be rolled out, it was determined to actually hold those later in the evening to try to have them more accessible to members, recognizing that members come from often commute to work, and we were, even though we went in different regions across the province, that particular location where the session was being held, it may take some members time to drive to. So we did hold those later, and I think we would be open to potentially adjusting the time in future or trialing something different if it was believed that that would be involve more people being attending. Today at the Nurse Whittlaufer inquiry, it came out that fear of union responses or grievances led to verbal warnings being given to Whittlaufer rather than written warnings that might have led to her being stopped earlier and perhaps lives saved. Could there be a similar problem with the OCT? I mean, that's all conjecture, but Michael, did you want to start off?
I think, sure. I think the short answer is there could be a perception of that, but I don't think there could be a similar situation, and I'll explain why in the way that we work with our employers. Under our act, all of the employers, and those would be district school boards, but also private schools or any employer, has an obligation under the act to report to the college, not to make a complaint, but to report when they have restricted the duties of a member in any way, when there has been a criminal charge laid against a member or a criminal conviction, or any other time when they feel the college should look into the conduct, the competence, or the capacity of a member. Given that, I don't think there could be a circumstance in our context where the employer, the employer may, certainly, may have decided to give a written warning or something of that nature. It doesn't influence what the college would do. We would then do an investigation of what were the circumstances that led to your employer action. We'll look independently and fairly at all of the facts to make a determination about what should happen at the college level. And then, not to go on, for too long, but Rob Ryan gave you a sense of the volume of complaints that we receive and how they're adjudicated, and sometimes at an early stage, with an admonishment, perhaps with a caution or a reminder. In those cases, not to equate this to a teaching situation, where that panel feels that if these allegations are true, if proven true, they should result in something more than a caution reminder, they would refer it to a hearing, and then it could result in a suspension, a revocation, conditions. And again, due process and fairness to the member, they have an opportunity to defend themselves. But again, based on that employer report, the college will take its own action independent of what's happening with respect to the employer. Angela, anything further on that one? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then, as the Whittlaufer inquiry changed the corporate approach to risk mitigation. I wouldn't say that it has changed it, but you heard Jan Robinson. Soon I'm going to ask Jan to come on up here and answer some questions. It hasn't changed it. I think it's informed our risk identification and mitigation. So we look at what's happening in the regulatory sector very broadly. As a college on a daily basis. We developed a forecasting report a few years ago where we brought in experts, we brought in other regulators and said, tell us about what you think is on the horizon. What are the challenges, the rewards, and what are the risks that we should be on the lookout for? Every day we have a news service that gives us the media reports about the teaching profession, but about any other profession. And we, in our various roles here at the college and as council members, reflect on those and are informed by them. So I would say hasn't changed the approach, but has informed it, has sharpened it, and as you heard this evening, we're in a constant cycle of continuous improvement, looking at how can we better be more vigilant, in our case, to make sure that students are safe, to inspire public confidence, to act swiftly, and to be seen to be acting swiftly. Even when we can't provide the details, we can talk about process in those cases. Angela, you want to say?
Just to add that I know, having attended some conferences where college staff did present, and they've spoken about being agile and leading on the edge, and that would be something that would likely drive, always looking ahead and moving forward and making improvements. So they would likely respond accordingly to trends and to risk. Kathy English is the public editor of the Toronto Star. The Toronto Star wrote an editorial article on June 1st stating that Ontario voters should back NDP to stop Doug Ford. It's more than likely that Kathy English is part of the Toronto Star editorial board. Why is Kathy English invited to speak to the Ontario College of Teachers on the eve of the Ontario election? Isn't this an ethical consideration that the Ontario College of Teachers must address by having Kathy English removed from speaking on June 6th, who made the decision to invite her to speak on the eve of the Ontario election? Since this is a matter of ethics at the highest political level, should this person or people responsible for inviting her to speak to the college submit their resignations? Well, the invitation to Kathy English to sit on our panel this evening occurred some time ago, and Kathy English is in fact not a member of the Star's editorial board. And if you get an opportunity to visit the Toronto Star website, that information is there. I believe they list 4 editors, none of which are her. And Michael, did you want to add a bit?
I think it's a good question and a fair one. We also extended the invitation to Ms. English before we knew the date of the election, and I think as she said this evening, and Angela has reiterated, she's not a member of the editorial board because when she extended the invitation to me, she said she wasn't responsible for that. And so the Toronto Star may have an opinion on whom they're endorsing. Kathy, as an individual and in her role here this evening, is not. And I don't think we heard anything of a political nature in the sense of the election. We heard certainly political nature of regulation. I don't think it is an ethical consideration. We do take great care and time in selecting our speakers, and as you saw, of high quality, who have something to say not only about regulation, but about the public interest more generally. And I thought all of our panelists did that very well, and Kathy as well. Thanks. You don't have to applaud every question, but if you'd like to, you're welcome to. I'll just pause. So the question is, the college or a Q course providers, additional qualification course providers, considering offering some sort of incentive, perhaps financial, to encourage more teachers to become qualified in subject areas with shortages, example, French second language. So just to go back, just to make sure that we're all aware, the college develops guidelines for the additional qualification courses that are those 400 courses that certified teachers can take to gain greater depth in their area of study, or to do to gain other areas of study, or take on roles as a principal, a supervisory officer. FSL is one of the areas where someone can take a course to teach in immersion or core French settings. I think in part the incentive for someone to take a course in FSL is that there is employment. We have a shortage of FSL teachers. We have a shortage of immersion teachers, of teachers for Francophone schools. So in part, the incentive is you have greater opportunity for employment and greater breadth across the province. So we are, in part, promoting that access to employment as an incentive. We're not considering providing financial incentives to members. Other groups may be, employers may be doing that, teacher federations or others that have a more active role in employment. Again, we do not. They may be, but the college is not. That said, I think in part the expansion of our provider base has helped, in some cases, to defray the costs of additional qualification courses. So several years ago, we looked at who can provide these courses, and for a while it was restricted mostly to faculties of education, but we know there's expertise in other organizations such as district school boards, teacher federations, and they can now offer the courses. In many cases, an employer will offer the course, the additional qualification course, at a greatly reduced cost or free to their members, and the same in teacher federations. And so I think those, while not incentives per se, they do help to make the course more accessible, and we do know that that's important. And that said, again, we're part of provincial groups looking at the labor market for FSL and French language teachers about what is our role in that, and making sure that we have access to the programs that will lead to the qualification, to making them more accessible, looking at flexible formats for them. Angela, anything from you? And Angela and I are both FSL teachers as well, and so we know very well, though, in that particular area, the challenges in recruiting them, and so have also offered our expertise in that area. But we're also looking at, it's not just FSL that's a shortage area. There are other areas, and so we look at those as well, and try to ensure our voices are part of the provincial dialogue. We're going to take time with this one. Thank you, merci. Well, I would say you're welcome. De rien. Thank you. I think that's a comment on the proceedings so far. Yeah, you want to? Yeah.
Very bright. So I think that brings us to the end of the question period. You guys can't read it, especially in the back, but you'll notice it says 3 minutes, 2 minutes, and it adds up. So these are coming in on the fly. So just so you're aware of that a lot of these questions are not aware of as they're coming up. So first off, I'd like to thank our panelists for being here this evening and answering some of the tough questions that they were asked. Of course, Of course, thank our chair for her report and our committee leaders for their reports tonight, and the registrar for his reports, and for Angela and Michael for answering the tough questions. And of course, thank all the members for submitting your questions this evening. Just a reminder that there's being hosted at the college's Margaret Wilson Library on the 14th floor. Reception there, so please drop in by to see the full range of fees and services available, including resources for members. So once again, thank everybody for taking the time for being here, and see you next year. Bye.